The wind carried the scent of rain through the canyon that evening, whispering through the tall grass and the gray pines. An Apache warrior named Koa, scarred by years of battle and betrayal, rode along the muddy riverbank beneath a copper sky. His dark hair whipped across his face, his chest bare beneath his weathered poncho, the marks of a survivor etched into his skin. He had seen too many towns burn, too many friends buried beneath desert dust. He wasn't looking for anyone that day. In truth, he had been avoiding people for years. But fate in the Old West didn't ask for permission, it just pulled souls toward one another. Like the storm clouds gathering above, Koa's horse, a restless gray stallion, stopped near a cluster of willows beside a narrow river. Through the rain's mist, Koa saw something that made him rein in tight, a small cabin, nearly hidden beneath the trees. Smoke curled weakly from its chimney, and through the window, the faint flicker of lamplight glowed against the storm-dark sky. Someone lived there. He hesitated. White settlers rarely welcomed an Apache near their home. He had seen bullets fly for less. But then a cry, a human voice, soft and broken, carried faintly through the wind. It was a woman's voice. Koa dismounted slowly. His moccasins sank into the wet earth as he approached the cabin door. The sound came again, trembling, frightened. Please. Please go away. He froze. The door was cracked open just an inch, enough for him to see the flicker of firelight inside. The voice came once more, desperate this time, trembling with tears. I'm not wearing clothes. Please don't come inside. Koa stopped breathing. Her voice wasn't angry. It was afraid, fragile, trembling like the rain against the window. His instinct told him to leave. Yet something about that tone made his blood run cold with worry. She didn't sound like someone embarrassed. She sounded like someone hurt. Ma'am, he said quietly, his deep voice rough from dust and silence. I heard someone crying. I mean no harm. There was no answer. Only the crackle of the fire and the thump of rain on the roof. Koa's hand brushed the wooden door. He could walk away, let her be, but something inside him refused. Maybe it was the soldier in him. Maybe the man who had watched too much suffering. He pushed the door open just enough to see inside, and what he saw made him stop cold. A woman, around 30, sat on the floor near the fireplace, clutching a blanket around herself. Her skin was pale, her hair damp from sweat and rain. Beside her was a tipped-over basin of water streaked with blood. Her bare shoulder bore deep, red welt/marks. She gasped when she saw him. No, please, I told you not to. Koa held up his hand slowly, stepping back. I will not touch you, he said softly. You're hurt. Tears welled in her eyes, and she bit her trembling lip. They said they'd come back if I told anyone. Please, just go before they see you here. Koa's jaw tightened. Who did this? She shook her head, sobbing into the blanket. Men from the town. Bounty hunters. They thought I hit a fugitive. I tried to stop them. Her voice cracked. They said they'd make me talk. Koa's eyes darkened. He knew the kind of cruelty that walked in this land. Slowly, he knelt near the door, keeping his distance. Do you have medicine? She shook her head. He pulled a small leather pouch from his belt. Inside were herbs and crushed root-sold Apache remedies. Let me help, he said. Her eyes softened, fear giving way to exhaustion. After a long silence, she whispered, You shouldn't. If they find you here, they'll kill you too. Koa looked toward the window where lightning cracked across the sky. Then they'll have to find me first. The woman's breath trembled as he began mixing the herbs near the firelight. For a moment, she just watched him, this stranger from the wilderness, his face marked by strength and quiet pain. He worked with careful hands, never looking at her, never crossing her line of modesty. When he handed her the small bowl of crushed roots and water, she hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. What's your name? She whispered. Koa, he said. She nodded faintly, pressing the mixture to her wounds. Mine is Elise. The rain outside deepened, thunder rolling through the valley. Inside that lonely cabin, two broken lives crossed paths in the middle of a storm neither of them had chosen. And as lightning flashed again, Koa saw something on the table, a blood-stained letter sealed with a broken wax emblem. He didn't know it yet, but that letter would change both their lives. The storm raged through the canyon all night, slashing the wooden cabin with sheets of rain and rattling its windows like ghostly hands. Inside, the only light came from the flickering fire where Koa sat on the floor, sharpening his knife with a flat stone. Across from him, wrapped tightly in her blanket, Elise sat near the hearth, her skin pale and her eyes heavy with pain. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence between them was not awkward, it was heavy, filled with the kind of understanding that only two wounded souls could share. Elise finally whispered, "Why did you come in?" "I told you not to." Koa paused, running a thumb over the blade's edge. "Because you were bleeding," he said simply. A cry for help is louder than words. Her eyes lifted toward him, studying his face in the firelight. The scars that crossed his cheek and shoulder looked like stories carved by survival itself. "You're Apache," she murmured, not accusingly, just acknowledging. He nodded once. "And you're alone." That silence returned again, broken only by the hiss of rain against the roof. Elise lowered her gaze. "My husband built this cabin," she said quietly. 2 winters ago. He died last spring. Fever took him. I stayed because this is all I have left." Koa's gaze softened. "And the men who hurt you?" Her hands clenched around the blanket. "They came looking for a fugitive. Said a man shot a banker in Red Rock and rode this way. They didn't believe me when I said I hadn't seen anyone. They thought I was lying." Tears glistened in her eyes as she added, "They said they'd come back." Koa's jaw tightened. "You did nothing wrong." Elise gave a broken laugh. "In this land, being alone is wrong enough." A gust of wind slammed against the door. Koa rose to check the latch. His silhouette loomed tall against the fire-broad shoulders, dark hair dripping rainwater down his back, tribal beads glinting faintly in the light. He turned to her. "You should rest." "I'll stay by the door." Elise hesitated, then whispered, "You don't have to." "I do," he said, settling near the window with quiet determination. "They might come back." She didn't argue again. Within minutes, her breathing slowed and she drifted into uneasy sleep. Koa stayed awake, staring out into the storm. He could barely see the trees through the downpour. But his instincts, though sharpened from years of war and ambush, told him something was wrong. When the thunder finally eased, he rose silently and stepped outside. The rain had softened into mist, and the moon, pale and veiled, cast faint silver light over the muddy ground. He crouched low near the edge of the clearing. That's when he saw them, boot prints, deep and fresh, leading toward the back of the cabin. Koa's pulse slowed. Someone had been there recently. Maybe even during the storm dot he followed the tracks to the tree line where they vanished into the darkness. From somewhere beyond, faint voices drifted none, low and cruel, the kind that hunted for gold or blood. He returned to the cabin at once. Elise stirred as he entered, eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" "Riders," he said. 3, maybe 4. They've been watching." Her face went pale. "They said they'd come for me at dawn if I didn't tell them where he was." "Who?" Koa asked. Elise hesitated. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "The man they're after, the fugitive, they think I helped him. But I didn't." She swallowed hard. "At least, I don't think I did." Koa frowned. "You don't think?" She looked away. "Last week, a man came here. He was wounded. He begged for water. I helped him, but he left before I could even ask his name. He had a letter in his coat. When those bounty men came, they said he killed someone important, and that letter on my table. They thought it proved I knew him." Koa turned toward the blood-stained letter still resting on the table, the broken seal glinting in the firelight. "May I see it?" Elise nodded weakly. He picked it up carefully. The wax bore the impression of a hawk and old army insignia. The parchment was smudged with blood, but he could make out faint words. He was not the traitor you think. The truth lies in the canyon of bones. Koa's brow furrowed. He didn't know what it meant yet, but his gut told him the letter was dangerous, too dangerous for Elise to be holding. "Those men will return for this," he said quietly. "And when they do, they won't ask questions." Elise's eyes glistened. "Then what do we do?" Koa met her gaze through the dim firelight, his voice steady and deep. "We don't wait for them." Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the cabin, a different kind of storm was just beginning, one of secrets, revenge, and a bond neither of them had expected. For the first time in years, Koa felt something stir inside him, purpose. He wasn't just a warrior anymore. Tonight, he would become her protector, and somewhere in the distance, beneath the rolling fog, a group of riders began their descent toward the cabin by the river. The gray light of dawn crept slowly across the valley, turning the mist into silver threads that hung between the pines. Inside the cabin, Koa was already awake, standing near the doorway with his knife in one hand and his eyes fixed on the horizon. The fire had burned low, filling the room with a cold orange glow. Behind him, Elise stirred beneath her blanket. Her eyes fluttered open, searching the dim room until they found him silent, steady, unyielding. "You haven't slept," she murmured. Koa didn't answer right away. "The storm is gone," he said instead. "But they'll be coming soon." Elise sat up, clutching the blanket closer to her chest. "You really think they'll come back?" He looked over his shoulder, his voice low and certain. "I know men like that. They don't leave until they've taken what they want." The room went quiet again, the tension heavy as the mist outside. Koa stepped toward the table, picking up the blood-stained letter once more. He studied the words again in the faint light seeping through the window. The wax emblem of the hawk glinted faintly. "This letter," he said, "it's from a soldier." "Or someone pretending to be?" Elise frowned. "A soldier?" He nodded. "That symbol belonged to a cavalry unit, the 7th out of Fort Travis. They fought the Apache years ago." Her eyes widened. "Then why would someone from the army send a letter to a fugitive?" Koa slipped the letter into his belt pouch. Maybe he wasn't a fugitive at all. Before Elise could speak again, the sound of horses echoed faintly through the valley, hooves thudding against the wet ground. Koa's hand went instantly to his knife. "They're here." Elise's breath hitched. "What do we do?" He moved to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to peek outside. 4 riders approached slowly through the fog, rifles slung across their backs. Their leader, a tall man in a long black coat, raised a hand to signal the others. Koa turned to Elise. "Do you have a back door?" She nodded toward the rear of the cabin. Through the pantry. He crossed the room quickly, scanning the walls. "There's a small ridge north of here. If you follow the creek, you can reach it by noon. Stay there until I come." Her voice trembled. "You mean you're not coming with me?" "I'll hold them off." She stared at him in disbelief. "Koa, they'll kill you." His expression didn't waver. "I've faced worse than 4 men with guns." A pounding shook the cabin door. "Open up!" A voice shouted. "We know you're in there, Missy." "Time to talk about that letter." Elise gasped, clutching the blanket tighter. Koa leaned close to her, his voice barely a whisper. "Go. Now, take the back path. Don't stop." For a heartbeat, Their eyes locked hers, full of fear and guilt, his calm and resolute. Then she nodded, disappearing into the shadows of the pantry. The pounding grew louder. Koa moved toward the door, every muscle tensing. The moment the latch began to rattle, he kicked the door open hard. The man in the black coat stumbled backward, cursing, as Koa burst out into the mist. The bounty hunters froze at the sight. A shirtless Apache warrior, broad-chested and glistening with sweat and rain, tribal beads hanging from his neck, knife in hand, eyes burning like wildfire. "Where's the woman?" The leader snarled, raising his gun. Koa didn't answer. He lunged forward, his knife slicing the man's arm before the gun fired. The shot echoed through the trees, scattering crows into the air. One of the other men tried to grab his rifle, but Koa spun, striking him with the hilt of his blade, sending him crashing into the mud. 2 shots rang out in quick succession. One grazed Koa's shoulder, blood streaking down his skin. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain. He grabbed the fallen rifle and fired once clean, precise, final. The leader staggered back, clutching his chest, falling to his knees. The other men bolted, vanishing into the trees. Koa stood in the rain, chest heaving, blood and water mixing down his skin. From behind him came a faint cry. He turned. Elise stood at the edge of the forest, staring at the scene in horror. She had come back. "I told you to run," he said, his voice ragged. Tears streaked her cheeks. "I couldn't leave you." Koa sighed, wiping the blade clean on the dead man's coat. "Then you'll have to keep running with me, because more will come when these don't return." Elise swallowed hard. "Where will we go?" He looked toward the mountains rising in the distance. "North, to the Canyon of Bones. That's where the truth behind this letter lies." And as the morning sun broke through the clouds, shining on the river and the fallen men, the 2 unlikely souls one hunted, one scarred, began their journey together into a world that would test every ounce of their courage and trust. The wilderness stretched endlessly before them, miles of jagged stone and wind-carved ridges, each shadow whispering of secrets buried long ago. Koa rode silently ahead, his bare chest glistening beneath the morning sun, his dark hair blowing against the wind. Behind him, Elise clung to the saddle, wrapped in his poncho, her eyes weary but watchful. They had been riding since dawn, leaving behind the smoke of the cabin that now lay quiet and ruined. Koa didn't look back. He knew what they would find if they returned, buzzards circling over the fallen, bounty hunters and fresh tracks leading right to them. "The canyon," he said at last, breaking the silence, "is 2 days north." Elise nodded, though she didn't know what to expect when they arrived. "Why do you call it the Canyon of Bones?" Koa's expression darkened. "My people say it's a cursed place. A battlefield that swallowed hundreds of lives when the cavalry slaughtered an Apache village long ago. The bones still lie beneath the sand." She shivered, clutching the poncho tighter. "And you think the truth, the one in that letter, is there?" He glanced back at her, his eyes steady. "That's what the message said. The truth lies in the Canyon of Bones. Whoever wrote it died for a reason. I need to know why." They rode on in silence for hours, through sagebrush and rocky trails that wound between cliffs. Around noon, they stopped beside a stream to rest. Koa knelt at the water's edge, washing the blood from his shoulder, while Elise gathered dry twigs to start a small fire. Watching him under the sunlight, Elise couldn't help but notice how every scar on his body told a story of battles fought, of losses endured, of survival. There was a quiet strength in him, one that frightened her and yet made her feel safe. "Why are you helping me, Koa?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. "You don't even know me." He looked up from the stream, water dripping from his hair. "Maybe because once someone helped me when I didn't deserve it." Elise tilted her head. "Who?" Koa stared at the flowing water, his jaw tightening. "A woman," he said after a long pause. "A settler's wife. She found me after a battle shot, bleeding. She nursed me back to life. Her husband found out and killed her for it." Elise's breath caught. "I'm sorry." Koa shrugged faintly. "It was long ago. But when I heard you crying in that cabin, I saw her face again." Elise's eyes glistened. For a long while, they just listened to the wind. Then Koa pulled a letter from his pouch. Whoever this soldier was, he risked his life to send this. There must be something in that canyon, something powerful enough for men to kill for. Before Elise could reply, Koa's gaze suddenly sharpened. His instincts caught at first the faint crunch of gravel behind the rocks. He stood quickly, motioning for silence. Elise froze. Koa reached for his knife, moving soundlessly toward the ridge. From behind a cluster of boulders, a shadow flickered. Then another. Gunfire split the silence. Koa dove low, pulling Elise down as a bullet tore through the air where her head had been. He rolled to his feet, eyes blazing. They found us. 3 bounty riders emerged from the rocks, rifles ready. One of them sneered, "You thought you could run, Apache? The lady's worth more alive, but you? You're just a bonus." Koa didn't wait for words. He lunged forward, swift as lightning, his knife flashing. One shot fired, grazing his ribs, but he didn't stop. The first man went down with a scream. The second raised his gun, but Elise, trembling yet fierce, grabbed a burning stick from the fire and struck him across the face. He fell back, cursing. Koa turned, snatching the rifle from the ground and firing at the third rider. The echo rolled across the canyon walls until all that remained was the rush of wind and the pounding of Elise's heart. Koa stood over the fallen men, breathing hard. "They won't stop," he said grimly. "Someone sent them someone who wants that letter buried." Elise's hand shook as she touched his wounded side. "You're bleeding again." He gritted his teeth. "It's nothing. We need to move before sunset." She looked around. The land was harsh and empty, yet strangely sacred. Bones of old wars lay half buried in the sand, pale and silent beneath the sun. "We're close, aren't we?" she whispered. Koa nodded slowly, scanning the horizon. "Yes, the Canyon of Bones is near." As the wind rose, carrying dust across the empty plains, Elise felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. She didn't know what truth awaited them there, but something told her it wasn't just about a letter or a dead soldier. It was about Koa, about his past, and about why fate had brought them together. And somewhere beyond the hills, unseen eyes were already watching their every move. By dusk, the wind had grown colder. The sun bled red across the horizon as Koa and Elise reached the edge of a vast gorge that cut through the earth like a wound. The air was still, heavy, and filled with a strange echo, one that made Elise shiver even before she saw the sight below. The Canyon of Bones. The name was no lie. Scattered across the pale sand and rock lay the remains of a massacre, long-forgotten bleached skulls, broken arrows, rusted rifles half buried in dust. The bones of men, women, and children rested where they fell generations ago. The place was silent except for the whistle of wind weaving through the cracks in the cliffs. Koa stood at the rim, his jaw tight, eyes hollow with memory. "This was my people's home," he said quietly. "Until the army came." Elise swallowed hard. "And they called it justice." He nodded once, the muscles in his chest tightening. "They said we were rebels. But it was the soldiers who brought fire to the village. My mother was here when it happened." Elise's voice trembled. She died here?" Koa's gaze stayed on the canyon. "I was a child. I saw her fall. I survived because a stranger hid me under the bodies." His voice went low, thick with a pain long buried. "I never came back." "Until now?" Elise touched his arm gently. Maybe this is where you were meant to come back to find what they left behind." He turned to her then, his dark eyes reflecting both sorrow and determination. "We're not here for ghosts, Elise. We're here for truth." They climbed down the narrow path that wound through the canyon walls, careful with every step. The air grew cooler as the last light faded, and the eerie stillness made even the crunch of their boots sound too loud. Halfway down, Koa stopped near a cluster of fallen stones. Something caught his eye, a wooden chest, half buried in dust. The iron latch was rusted, and an old army insignia was barely visible on its lid, the same hawk symbol from the letter. Elise gasped softly. "It's the same mark." Koa knelt, brushing the dirt away. The lid groaned as he forced it open. Inside were papers, weathered uniforms, and sealed documents, all bearing the U.S. Army stamp. One folder, tied with red cord, had words faintly scrawled across the front. "Operation Cleansing Wind." Elise frowned. "What is that?" Koa untied the cord and opened the papers. His brow furrowed as he read aloud in a low, harsh voice. "Authorized by Major Aaron Vance, elimination of Apache civilians suspected of aiding deserters. Orders to erase evidence and silence witnesses." Elise covered her mouth in shock. It was an order. They planned it. Koa's eyes burned with fury. And they called it a battle. They murdered children and wrote it down like a report. He turned the page and froze. A name was written at the bottom. Elias Ward. Elise blinked. That's my father's name." Koa looked at her sharply. "Your father was an officer?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "He was. He left when I was 10. My mother said he deserted the army after something terrible happened, that he couldn't live with the guilt. He died last year." Koa stared at the papers again. He tried to expose this. "That's why they called him a traitor." Elise's eyes filled with tears. "Then the man they were hunting, the one who came to my cabin." Koa nodded slowly. "He wasn't a fugitive. He was trying to deliver this." Elise's voice broke. "And I let him die on my doorstep." Koa took her hand, his rough fingers steady against hers. "You didn't let him die. You gave him a chance. And now it's up to us to finish what he started." A sudden echo cracked through the canyon, the sound of distant gunfire. Elise's heart leapt. "They followed us." Koa's instincts took over. He grabbed the chest, hauling it behind a boulder. "Get down." Bullets struck the rocks, splintering dust into the air. Elise crouched beside him, trembling as he reloaded the old rifle he'd taken from the bounty hunter. "How many?" she whispered. "Too many," he muttered. "But they don't know where we are yet." She pressed her hands over her ears as another shot rang out. "Koa, what do we do?" He looked toward the canyon's far end, where the setting sun carved a golden slit between the cliffs. "We finish this. We take this proof North Fort Travis still stands. If we can reach it, the truth won't die here." Elise met his gaze, seeing not just a warrior but a man fighting for the ghosts of his people. "Then I'll go with you," she said firmly. Koa gave a faint, proud smile. "You've got more courage than most men I've known." And as darkness fell over the canyon of bones, the two of them, one carrying the sins of the past, the other its proof, moved deeper into the shadows, ready to face the army of lies waiting beyond the horizon. The night returned, heavy and restless. As Koa and Elise reached the ruins of an old mission church deep in the valley, its broken cross tilted, its stone swallowed by weeds. A cold wind swept through the hollow place, carrying whispers that didn't belong to the living. Elise's torch flickered weakly against the thick darkness, painting long, dancing shadows across the cracked walls. "This was once a place of mercy," she murmured. "Now it feels like the earth itself wants to forget it." Koa stood a few paces behind her, his bare chest streaked with soot and dust. the faint glimmer of his tribal jewelry catching the light. His muscles tensed as he scanned the shadows, the hunter's instinct alive in every breath. "The ones who destroyed my people came from here," he said, his deep voice carrying both sorrow and steel. "They took food, land, and names. They thought they could take the soul too." Elise turned toward him, her eyes soft with both curiosity and fear. "Then why come back?" He lowered his gaze, brushing his long black hair from his face. "Because this is where it ended for them, and where it begins for me." They pushed open the heavy wooden door. It groaned like a dying thing. Inside, the scent of ash and candle wax lingered, as if ghosts still prayed here. On the altar lay a half-burned ledger, its ink faded but legible. Elise picked it up carefully, her hands trembling as she read the names aloud: women, children, and tribes marked as removed or lost. Then one entry froze her voice. "Koa, this one says the boy was spared." Koa froze. His entire body stiffened, as if lightning struck his spine. He stepped closer, the torchlight trembling in his hand. "Read it again." "It says, the boy with the mark, spared for service to the father. Age 5. For a long time, Koa said nothing. Then his hand lifted slowly to his chest, and there, beneath the necklaces, a faint scar shaped like a circle burned pale against his skin. "They branded me," he whispered. "I was that boy." Elise's breath caught. "You were one of them." "No," he interrupted, his tone breaking between rage and grief. "I was one of yours. They took me. They tried to make me forget the songs of my people, the language of the wind, the spirit of the river." His eyes filled with pain. "But when I escaped, I carried both names, the one they gave me and the one my mother whispered before they killed her." Silence consumed the old church. Only the faint crackle of the torch echoed through the stone. Elise stepped forward slowly, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You came here to destroy it, or to remember?" "Both," he said. He set the torch in the center of the room. Flames licked the dry wood, climbing fast, devouring the old walls. The smoke rose like black wings. Elise coughed, stepping back. "Koa, the fire," he turned to her, eyes burning brighter than the flames. "Let it burn. Let their lies turn to dust." The heat surged around them. The ledger curled, blackened, and fell apart. Through the firelight, Koa's figure stood like a spirit of vengeance, a muscular silhouette painted in red and gold. His long black hair whipped in the wind, and his voice, when it came, was low and fierce. "I will not live as a shadow anymore. My mother's name, my tribe's song, they live again." Elise reached for him as a beam cracked above. "Koa, we need to go." He turned once more toward the burning altar, whispering something in Apache, a farewell, a promise, before seizing Elise's hand and running into the storm. Outside, the church collapsed behind them, lighting the valley in orange flame. The smoke rose high into the night, and for a fleeting moment, the clouds parted, revealing a silver moon shining directly on Koa's scarred chest. He looked up, breathing hard. "Now they see," he said softly. "The boy they tried to erase still stands." Elise looked at him through the firelight, trembling. "What will you do now?" Koa turned toward the dark hills, where thunder rolled and destiny waited. "Finish it," he whispered. The wind howled through the valley like the cry of an ancient spirit, carrying away the ashes of both memory and sin. The sun rose blood-red over the desert. Smoke still curled behind them, rising like a dark ghost into the morning sky. Koa stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, his bare chest streaked with soot, his long black hair whipping in the wind. The fire from the mission still burned in his eyes. Behind him, Elise leaned against a boulder, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her gaze never left him. For the first time since the storm began, silence fell. No guns, no screams, no past to chase. Only the wind, whispering through the sagebrush, carrying the voices of those long gone. Koa crouched, his fingers brushing the earth as if greeting an old friend. "This land remembers," he said softly, "even when men try to bury its truth." Elise walked closer, her hair tangled, her face pale. "And now that truth lives again, because of you." He looked at her, his face carved with strength and sorrow. "Because of us." A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't last long. From the canyon below, the faint echo of hoofbeats rolled across the sand. Elise tensed. "They followed us." Koa didn't move. He simply straightened, the sun glinting off his tribal jewelry, his muscles taut as stone. "Let them come." Moments later, a group of riders appeared, bounty hunters, faces covered with dust and hate. The same men who had slaughtered his people. Their leader, wearing a priest's medallion, shouted, "You think you can erase what we built, savage?" Koa didn't answer. He stepped forward, his bare feet pressing into the dirt, his every motion calm, deadly. Elise felt her pulse quicken. There were too many of them. "Koa," she whispered, "there's no way." He turned his head slightly, eyes full of fire. "There's always a way for a man who's already dead." Before she could speak, Koa raised his blade, the same blade his mother once carved from stone, and let out a low cry, the cry of his ancestors. It wasn't rage. It was remembrance. The first shot cracked through the morning, echoing off the cliffs. Koa lunged into the dust, moving with the fury of a storm. The bounty hunters fell one by one, their arrogance swallowed by the very earth they had claimed. Elise could hardly breathe as she watched the man she once feared move like a spirit, a shadow of vengeance and freedom. Then silence returned. Koa stood alone, his chest rising and falling, his blade dripping red into the sand. The survivors fled into the hills. The wind blew harder, sweeping over the battlefield and erasing the footprints, as if the earth itself wished to hide the memory. Elise stepped closer, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's over." He shook his head slowly. "No, it only begins when I walk away." She frowned. "Walk away? To where?" He turned to face her fully now, his eyes softer, gentler than she'd ever seen them. "Back to where the wind was born. Back to my people." Her lips trembled. "But they're gone." He looked toward the horizon where the sun bled gold across the mountains. "Not gone, waiting, in the rivers, in the stones, in me." Elise reached for his hand. "Then don't leave me here alone." Koa hesitated. For a moment, his warrior's mask broke. He stepped close, pressing her hand to his chest, over the scar that marked both his wound and his survival. "You're not alone, Elise. You carry the truth now. Guard it. Tell them what really happened here." Tears glimmered in her eyes. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "The wind doesn't stay. It moves." She wanted to stop him, but she understood Koa didn't belong to the world of men anymore. He belonged to something older. Something free. As he walked away across the desert, the rising sun burned against his back, turning his skin golden, his long black hair shimmering like a river of night. Each step seemed to dissolve him into the wind, a spirit returning home. Elise watched until he vanished into the shimmering heat. The silence felt sacred. She knelt, picked up a small piece of turquoise that had fallen from his necklace, and pressed it to her heart. When she looked up, a soft breeze passed by, carrying the faint whisper of his voice, "The wind remembers." And for the first time since she met him, she smiled. Because she knew he was right. The desert may forget names, towns, and bones, but it never forgets those who walked with honor.